Welcome to another edition of This F***ing Guy, the series that spotlights one f***ing guy making America worse and explains why they suck. I'm Erin Ryan, host of Crooked Media's Hysteria podcast.
And I'm Alyssa Mastromonaco, the other host of Crooked Media's Hysteria podcast.
Well, Alyssa, this episode we're talking about Peter Thiel, the Silicon Valley goblin and putrefying moral mass that is stinking up America in the shadows like a dead mouse in a crawl space.
We've covered other Silicon Valley ghouls on this show before, Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, but neither of those are quite as evil or strange as Thiel.
Right. Elon Musk's brain is a snow globe of ketamine and empty promises, and Mark Zuckerberg is a pathetic dork who wants more than anything to be cool and doesn't mind causing a genocide or two along the way. But Peter Thiel combines the worst of both of them. He's a fundamentally unlikable, revenge-obsessed, wretched little creep who complains about taxes despite having more than anybody could ever need, and wants to live forever despite seeming like an incurably miserable person who kinda hates life.
He's a major reason that our government and tech sectors are currently dominated by misanthropic frauds. He's a reason that libertarians will not be beating the allegations that they are the worst. And perhaps most awful of all, he is the reason that we as a nation have been cursed with JD Vance.
Unforgivable. Peter Thiel was born in Frankfurt, Germany on October 11th, 1967. That's the same year as Laura Dern, Nicole Kidman, Jason Statham, Julia Roberts, and Vin Diesel. Now, the reason I'm bringing these people up is to point out that Peter Thiel has access to more resources than all of those beautiful celebrities, and he still looks like a leftover turkey leg.
When you've gotten so rich at the expense of the rest of us, the least you could do is look hot.
Thiel was raised an evangelical Christian, and his parents raised him in several locations where one might expect a supervillain to congeal. Germany, an illegally held uranium mining colony of apartheid-era South Africa, the Bay Area.
His parents banned TV until he was in middle school, a cautionary tale for any moms and dads out there who were thinking of raising their children screen-free. And like a lot of lonely little nerds, he got really into J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. He once claimed that he'd memorized the hefty trilogy.
Be so for real, Peter. No, you didn't.
Like a lot of nerds, Peter got really good at chess, carrying around a case of his pieces emblazoned with a sticker that read, "Born to Win." A 2011 George Packer profile of Thiel in the New York Times claims that when he lost matches in college, he'd knock the chess pieces off of the board and was known to say, "Show me a good loser and I'll show you a loser."
Well, at Stanford, Thiel continued to be a contrarian little shit, majoring in philosophy and founding the Stanford Review, a conservative campus publication, all the while getting angrier at everybody prettier, more popular, or less gay than he was. At the time, Thiel was in the closet, and given his Christian upbringing, seems like he kind of hated himself for it.
The only thing he hated more than himself was, and is, everybody else. In one profile, an unnamed acquaintance who had known Thiel for many years gave him this glowing review. "I'm not sure how much value he places on the more intimate human emotions. I've never seen him express them. It's certainly not the most developed aspect of his personality."
Yikes. Thiel was heavily influenced by the philosopher René Girard, who might be a perfectly lovely person in real life, but whose work has influenced the thought of such unpleasant cultural barnacles as Jordan Peterson and Camille Paglia. Girard pioneered something called mimetic theory, which, without getting too in the weeds, claims that humans desire things based on what they perceive others want, but that when other people desire the same things, conflict and violence can arise. The way to stave off violence as a result of mimetic rivalry is to bundle the blame onto a scapegoat group. Sacrificing this group is necessary to restore order and maintain peace.
Erin, that sounds a lot like cancel culture. I thought we didn't like cancel culture.
Yes, actually, if you want to get dorky about it, Girard has some compelling ideas to explain why everything seems so fucked up lately. Basically, society is in a mimetic spiral where people are constantly locked in ever-escalating mimetic rivalries without a clear off-ramp as scapegoats pile up left and right in the form of small-time insurance middle managers who lose their jobs because they got filmed throwing bread and saying the N-word at a sandwich shop employee. So, the way to come out on top in a world driven mad by mimetic desire is to be a contrarian. Or, well, this is less fun, go out of your way to feel empathy for outgroups. It might surprise you that young Peter Thiel, exhausting college libertarian, did not set out to be the next Bill Gates. He set out to be the next William Rehnquist. Thiel attended Stanford Law School, but his Supreme Court dreams died when he was rejected as a clerk by both Justice Antonin Scalia and Justice Anthony Kennedy. He had a brief legal career. We can't find evidence that he ever took or passed the bar, but after a few short years, metaphorically knocked the pieces off the chessboard of the legal profession and moved into smug contrarian commentary.
From William Rehnquist to Bill O'Reilly.
Unfortunately, political punditry requires a modicum of charisma. And Peter Thiel has the charisma of a garden slug. Here's a supercut of him on his 3.5-hour-long appearance on Joe Rogan's podcast in 2024. This about sums it up.
It's, and the thing that's, it's because, it's sensitive of the, or something like that.
Now, imagine that guy, but with 23 years less experience being a human being.
Still, there are plenty of places in American media for ugly men who don't care if you hate them. So in 1995, when everybody else his age was going to concerts, Peter Thiel and his edgelord friend David Sachs were writing a joyless book-length screed against multiculturalism run amok on college campuses called The Diversity Myth.
So let's speed run through some of the claims the pair made in The Diversity Myth. First, they described date rape as belated regret.
Some sinister shit right there.
Yeah, but it gets worse. As an example of rape awareness run amok, they pointed to the 1991 case of a Stanford student who claimed she'd been raped after drinking too much. They wrote, quote, although the alleged perpetrator was clearly guilty of serving alcohol to an underage woman and taking advantage of her resulting lack of judgment, there was no sexual assault. Understandably, however, the woman regretted the whole incident afterwards. End quote. The quote-unquote underage woman who they're strongly implying made up being raped because she felt bad was a 17-year-old freshman.
Brought to you by the spokespeople for Rohypnol. Thiel and Sachs concluded that actually the anti-rape movement was about hurting men, writing, quote, the purpose of the rape crisis movement seems as much about vilifying men as about raising awareness.
Thiel at the time was still in the closet. Nothing to throw off the scent of a gaydar like coming to the defense of dorm room rapists. In 2016, a full 21 years after the Diversity Myth's pub date, Thiel had the following to say: I wish I'd never written those things. Rape in all forms is a crime. I regret writing passages that have been taken to suggest otherwise. Alyssa, is this an apology?
Erin, it is the lowest grade apology possible. Thiel and Sachs also said real diversity requires a diversity of ideas, not simply a bunch of like-minded activists who resemble the bar scene from Star Wars.
And he loves that joke. He uses it like so many times. And then there was the Keith Raboy incident. Raboy was a part of Sachs and Thiel's collegiate cabal of unfuckables. To make a point about free speech, I guess, one fateful night Raboy and two other Stanford students started yelling homophobic slurs near the home of a lecturer. Raboy admitted to being part of the group that yelled, I hope you die of AIDS. I didn't say the F slur, I said forget, but we bleeped it so it would sound kind of like I was saying the word. The university declined to punish the students, setting off a firestorm.
Guess who Sachs and Thiel thought was in the wrong? I'll give you a hint. It wasn't the shitheads shouting an anti-gay slur outside of somebody's home. They compared student anger in response to Raboy to a witch hunt, the Spanish Inquisition, and the book 1984. They hailed Raboy as a brave free speech warrior.
Okay, Alyssa, would a gay guy defend a dude who yelled the F slur at a university staff member? Checkmate, self-hate. Decades later, Thiel would claim that his views on identity politics were now more nuanced. But in a 2023 essay in the New Criterion that really could have used a heavy-handed edit, Thiel doesn't sound as contrite, writing, when I look back on the diversity myth, almost 3 decades later, I still think that almost every point we made was right. There's very little that was wrong, which is both gratifying and depressing. The diversity myth was not a success. It sold few copies and was not part of the conversation in academia, and the news media pretty much ignored it. One unimpressed Goodreads reviewer characterized the book as an ode to the author's own imperiled entitlement. So now that Thiel has failed at being a hotshot judge and also failed at being a hotshot thought leader, he turns his sights on a sector where it's actually not hard to be psychopathic and succeed: finance.
Thiel made some money trading derivatives and started his own firm in 1996. A couple of years later, he and Max Levchin started PayPal. PayPal was originally supposed to be a libertarian banking paradise where people could transmit money easily without the pesky meddling of government regulations.
As Thiel's PayPal was ascendant, another South African shithead by the name of Elon Musk was also trying to make an internet bank called X. You love that letter, Elon. PayPal and X merged and Musk became the CEO. However, it wasn't long before those tricksy Thiel loyalists at the company, known this day embarrassingly as the PayPal Mafia, ousted Musk while Musk was on his honeymoon and replaced him with Thiel.
To paraphrase a widely used quote from a 2022 book on Thiel by Max Chafkin, Thiel thinks Musk is a fraud and Musk thinks Thiel is a sociopath.
Heartbreaking. The worst people you know just made some great points. eBay bought PayPal in 2002 for $1.5 billion. From the sale, Thiel made $55 million. Being that rich means that people will suck up to you by repeating your own self-aggrandizing mythology back to you until you believe that it's real. That's how Elon Musk, who is not nor has ever been an engineer of any kind, somehow fancies himself some kind of genius engineer. It's how casino bankrupter Donald Trump believes that he's a business genius.
We often see good luck misattributed to intelligence, especially in the world of tech. That's why we wrote a little jingle to remind our viewers of something very important. Just because you're rich doesn't make you smart.
Just because you're rich doesn't make you smart.
Extraordinary.
Make that my ringtone. Thiel's next lucky move was choosing to be the first outside investor in Facebook. A $500,000 loan gave him control of 10% of the company in its early days, and he did make a shitload of money off his Facebook investment. But he could have gotten a lot more money if he hadn't sold 20 million shares of Facebook months after its IPO and declined to purchase A shares.
He'd also be a lot richer if he'd invested early in Tesla. Remember, he was avowed frenemies with Elon Musk, but he didn't because he's a climate change skeptic.
When Thiel branches out beyond the tech sector, his name isn't quite as synonymous with success.
At one point, Peter Thiel tried to break into the world of fine dining with a restaurant called Frisson in San Francisco, which he opened with chef Daniel Patterson in 2004. Here's a description from the restaurant's now-defunct website.
A first kiss, a flirtatious glance, a sip of champagne, a bite of caviar, all that delights and excites. Welcome to Frisson, a stylish blend of high design, fine cuisine, and contemporary music. We fuse together exquisite cuisine available late into the evening with stunning architecture and an exciting, high-energy ambiance. A few unhinged references to deviant sexuality, and you've got yourself a monologue for SNL Stefan. Frisson also had the reputation for being overpriced and trying way too hard. Frisson, like the diversity myth, was a flop, closing permanently in 2008. That's because fundamentally uncool people cannot create cool things. Also in 2004, Thiel provided the seed money for a men's lifestyle and NASCAR magazine called American Thunder to be run by his former Stanford Review buddy Lucas Mast.
American Thunder did not sell. Powered only by the audacity of the two overconfident college libertarians with only a passing knowledge of the subject matter, the magazine published just a few issues before shuttering at the end of 2004.
Peter Thiel also invested in several companies that never made anything, among them Lightsail Energy, which was a startup that sold compressed air tanks to be used to power things like scooters. The company existed from 2008 to 2018 and never produced a single product.
Thiel also invested in a mobile payment app called Klinkle, with such a ridiculous history that it sounded like a plotline from the HBO show Silicon Valley.
Klinkle roared onto the scene in 2011 when a 20-year-old Stanford student named Lucas Duplan started collecting seed money for a new payment sending app. He was on the Forbes 30 Under 30 list. He had 50 employees, a waiting list to join Klinkle, 100,000 names long, and still nobody knew what the fuck the app even did. Anyway, surprise, surprise, giving a 20-year-old boy $30 million for a product that doesn't yet exist is, generally speaking, not a great idea. Klinkle went tits up in May 2016.
Peter Thiel's first hedge fund was also a bust. Thiel founded Clarium Capital Management LLC in 2002. At first, the firm did well. Its assets under management swelled to $8 billion by June of 2008. But it's easy to make money in a bull market, and what Thiel's firm did next calls into question his business acumen.
Just because you're rich doesn't make you smart.
By the middle of the summer of 2008, markets started to tank due to years of dramatic under-regulation, leading to a collapse of an entire asset class, which threatened to bring down the entire American economy, which you'd think would be a libertarian's dream, right? Under-regulation, we love it. Ever the contrarian, Thiel bet on the government disappointing him by intervening before the bottom really fell out. He went long on a whole bunch of stocks. That means he bet the market would go up. And we know what happened next. The market did not go up because the government did not intervene enough to stop stocks from continuing their nosedive. The next year, Thiel shorted stocks, aka bet that the market would go down just in time for stocks to go up again. By 2011, Clarium's holdings were down to $350 million, and most of it was Thiel's own money.
In a zippy little 2017 interview with New York Times' Maureen Dowd, Thiel declared that the age of Apple was over.
He said, "We know what a smartphone looks like and what it does. It's not the fault of Tim Cook, but it's not an area where there will be any more innovation." Since then, Apple has made hundreds of billions of dollars, launched AirPods and Apple TV Plus, and introduced better, more interesting phones. During that interview, Thiel also declared that Star Wars was better than Star Trek because Star Trek is for communists and Star Wars is for capitalists, which is the lamest reason I've ever heard for liking Star Wars.
In 2007, the website Valleywag published a story under the headline, "Peter Thiel is totally gay, people." The post was meant to call out the timidity of tech investors to engage with people who were outside of the typical founder mold. But Peter got big mad about being publicly outed against his will. He'd only started coming out to his friends when he was in his early 30s in 2003, and he wasn't yet ready to go wide with the news yet.
Years later, according to a book about Thiel, a young Australian Thiel acolyte, Aron D'Souza, suggested to Thiel that they should engage in a revenge plot against Valleywag's parent company Gawker by bankrolling legal action against the company by a separate plaintiff, offense TBD. Peter Thiel, always down for some plotting, was game. For those of you who are not there when the dark magic of the internet was written, like me, Gawker.com was, at its founding, a website that existed to publish embarrassing and tabloidy stories about figures in and around the self-serious New York City media industry. As it matured, that sensibility applied to all public figures, celebrities, politicians, and random scammers and gadflies alike.
So in October 2012, Gawker published a secretly recorded tape starring former professional wrestler Hulk Hogan having sex with his best friend Bubba the Love Sponge, Clem's wife. The company had gotten the tape from a tipster, and it was later claimed that after Bubba secretly recorded the tryst in 2006, he kept the tape in his desk at the radio station where he was a DJ. A rival DJ allegedly stole the tape and sent it to Gawker in some kind of bonkers Florida shock jock DJ war. When the tape hit Gawker's site, Hulk threatened to sue, and that's where Peter Thiel came in via his Australian intermediary.
God, Peter Thiel loves a plot. So, Alyssa, as you know, I worked for Gawker's sister site Jezebel off and on from about 2010 until late 2015. And while I had nothing to do with any editorial decisions involving the Hulk incident, I was in a front row seat for the legal saga that unfolded. By late 2014 or early 15, it was clear that something strange was underfoot. Like Hogan's legal team kept dragging things on, and that made the company's representatives suspicious that somebody else was paying Hogan's legal bills. Well, in 2016, it was revealed that the mystery benefactor was Silicon Valley's Nosferatu himself, Peter Thiel. And he told the New York Times that the reason he'd done it wasn't revenge, but specific deterrence meant to preserve the privacy of ordinary people. You know, ordinary people like Hulk Hogan. Also in 2016, a jury in Florida awarded the Hulkster $140 million in damages in the suit. Gawker Media sold off its assets with the exception of Gawker.com, which shut down. Eventually, the award was reduced from $140 million to $31 million. We can't say for sure that the Valleywag outing radicalized Thiel, but I can't say that it didn't either. Because shortly after 2007, Thiel started throwing money at political candidates. And like the money that he threw at Silicon Valley startups, some of the places he lavished his cash were real clunkers.
Thiel gave millions to support the failed 2008 and 2012 presidential campaigns of Ron Paul. He supported the failed California gubernatorial campaign of tech executive Meg Whitman, and in 2016, he initially supported the political candidacy of former Hewlett-Packard executive Carly Fiorina, whose campaign sputtered out like an HP machine trying to print a two-sided document.
Thiel's political wins were few and far between, save Ted Cruz's 2012 Texas Senate victory. But in 2016, Thiel had his chance to take his biggest contrarian political gamble yet, Donald Trump. Trump, at the time, was having trouble getting a foothold in Silicon Valley, which had spent the last 8 years cozying up to the Obama administration. Because Thiel does whatever he perceives as the opposite of the popular thing, the MAGA movement was a natural fit. He got so into MAGA world that he spoke at that year's Republican National Convention in Cleveland, Ohio. But when he gave his speech, he became the first openly gay man to speak at the RNC, emphasis on openly.
When I was a kid, the great debate was about how to defeat the Soviet Union, and we won. Now we are told that the great debate is about who gets to use which bathroom. This is a distraction from our real problems. Who cares? Of course, every American has a unique identity. I am proud to be gay. I am proud to be a Republican. But most of all, I am proud to be an American.
Okay. My favorite part of that clip is that no one is listening to him. They're all talking over him until he gets to the word bathroom. And then they all laser in and get real focused.
Once Trump was elected, Thiel was appointed to his transition team. No possible conflicts of interest in having a billionaire recommend appointments to roles that regulate industries directly impacting him, right?
Oh, in 2018, Peter Thiel claimed he was taking his ball and going home from Silicon Valley because of woke. And outlets like CNBC reported it as though Thiel was leaving the liberal hellhole that was the Bay Area and taking all of his businesses with him to some exotic locale like Bismarck, North Dakota, or Charleston, South Carolina. They reported that he might even be resigning from the board of Facebook.
But if you read past the headlines, it turns out he was only moving slightly south in California, maybe a half day's drive to the liberal heckhole of Los Angeles. The only businesses he was relocating with him were the Thiel Foundation and Thiel Capital. Everything else was staying put. And he stayed firmly on the board of Facebook until 2022, when he left to dedicate himself to be a political menace full time. If he had the juice, Peter Thiel would probably run for political office himself, but
Totally.
he has the appeal of a syringe in a sandbox. Instead, Thiel developed this not-at-all-suspect network of protégés, Little Peters Jr. In 2022, two Lil Thiels ran for the U.S. Senate. One of those men was Arizona's Blake Masters, who once had a kind of popular libertarian Tumblr. Remember Tumblr? Despite having his career bankrolled by a married gay man, said publicly that he didn't think that gay marriage should be legal. Of gay marriage, Blake Masters said, my, former boss and mentor Peter Thiel is gay. I went to his wedding. I wish him well. I don't think the Supreme Court should have decided that case that way. Marriage is between a man and a woman. Masters lost to Mark Kelly, a literal astronaut. Later, Masters would try to run for office in the state legislature and lose again.
The other Lil Thiel was JD Vance. Well, we all know what happened there. MSNBC's Rachel Maddow has characterized Vance's pre-political career as being Peter Thiel's intern. And while harsh, it's hard to deny. Vance basically got hard-eyed over Thiel from the moment he first saw him speak at Yale. And after he graduated, he immediately started working for Thiel-bankrolled businesses like the Mithril Fund.
Another Lord of the Rings reference.
Ugh.
In 2022, Thiel gave at least $15 million to Vance's Senate campaign, and Vance won because voters in Ohio weren't able to pick up on the fact that when JD Vance speaks, if you look closely, you can see Peter Thiel's lips moving. And now Adam Lambert's Wario is a heartbeat away from the presidency. Great work, everybody.
For more on JD Vance, please check out our This Fucking Guy episode on him.
This Fucking Guy is brought to you by PDS Debt. The system isn't broken, it's rigged. And if you're buried in debt, that's exactly how they want it. Big banks profit when you're desperate. Creditors win when you lose. But you don't have to play their game. PDS Debt helps you take back control. They've helped hundreds of thousands break free from credit cards, loans, and high-interest traps. It's your money, it's your future. Time to fight for both. PDS Debt goes beyond the numbers to understand your unique financial situation and craft a personalized plan designed for you. There is no minimum credit score required. They are here to help you save more, pay off your debt faster, and start putting money back where it belongs, in your pocket. PDS Debt is A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau, boasts thousands of 5-star reviews on Google, and holds a 5-star rating on Trustpilot. Why? Because PDS has helped hundreds of thousands of people get out of debt. This is one of those things that as soon as I read the description, I was like, I really could have used this when I was 24 years old. When I was 24, I was just out of college. I had all this student loan debt. I'd taken out credit cards I probably shouldn't have. And what I really needed was a disciplined, sensible, smart approach to getting that all under control. Because as soon as I was free of debt, a stress left my life, and I wish that for you as well. You're 30 seconds away from being debt-free. Get your free assessment and find the best option for you right now at pdsdebt.com/guy. That's pdsdebt.com/guy. pdsdebt.com/guy.
Thiel throwing his hat in the circus ring with Trump has yielded incalculable dividends. But now let's focus specifically on one company for which Thiel's involvement in Trump world is both making him even richer and endangering millions of people around the world. Palantir. Palantir was named after something from You guessed it. The Lord of the Rings. Apparently the only work of fiction Peter Thiel has ever read. In Lord of the Rings, the Palantir are seeing stones that give viewers access to the truth, which are corrupted and misused by the forces of evil.
Palantir is a data mining and surveillance company that markets its software to governments, businesses, and law enforcement. In a way, Palantir is like a social network containing all of your private information, whether you want it there or not. And the social network is only available to entities that pay Palantir. The white hat use of the company's technology is like anodyne business uses, like detecting fraud, security breaches, finding that more efficiently. But in practice, it's incredibly powerful spy software that results in many, many people getting killed. Like many products of Silicon Valley, the downside of the technology does not justify the upside, unless, of course, the downside is making you very rich. Here's the whoopsie doodle about Palantir. Palantir sells its spying technology to pretty much anybody who wants to buy it. So say you're an entity that wants to figure out where migrants gather and mass arrest them, or if you want to submit, say, Palestinians to nonstop surveillance, or if you want to start an AstroTurf campaign filling the comment sections of a critic's YouTube channels with negative comments, you are in Palantir's target demo. Congratulations. Palantir has been associated with AI-driven warfare and predictive policing, which sounds incredibly insidious. There's been some reporting that Palantir has been beta testing some of its newer technology on civilians in Gaza, and that many of the targets of the IDF bombings were selected via Palantir's AI model, with real flesh and blood soldiers just hitting start and walking away while the robots do the war. Google Project Lavender if you want to go down a terrifying rabbit hole.
This isn't just a tinfoil hat conspiracy theory, unless you consider Amnesty International tinfoil hat. The humanitarian organization issued a report warning Palantir that its lack of due diligence around who it was willing to work for was leading to human rights violations. In response to the report, Palantir was like, nuh-uh.
Palantir is a fucking evil company. Since Trump took office for a second time, more than $113 million has been funneled to Palantir from the federal government, in addition to the $795 million contract it already has with the Department of Defense. ICE recently agreed to pay Palantir $30 million to provide them with near real-time data on the movement of migrants within U.S. borders. It's been used to plot out and execute immigration raids and helped implement the first Trump administration's vile family separation policy.
Massive databases of license plates and real-time movement of Americans? Palantir. Law enforcement outsourcing what little of their brains they're still required to use for their jobs to an invasive AI model? Palantir.
Palantir software is now being used across the federal government in places like the Department of Defense, the IRS, and the Department of Homeland Security. Watchdogs have warned that this indicates that the government is moving to consolidate all of the data that the government could possibly gather on every American into one giant pool of data, which would basically make anyone surveillable by the government at any time. Good thing AI is totally infallible and works perfectly all the time.
But good news if you own Palantir stock. Since Trump's 2024 electoral victory, the stock price has more than doubled.
Now that we're through with the banal and sinister shit Thiel's wrapped up in, let's get back to some stupid shit. Peter Thiel, not a doctor, law student, philosophy degree, whatever. But he's got billions of dollars.
Just because you're rich doesn't make you smart.
And he's surrounded by people who tell him that he's brilliant all day long. So he's the perfect mark for wacky ideas about medical science, like the now defunct MetaMed, a concierge medical company that matched high-paying clients with rational clinicians in order to diagnose and treat illness.
Wait, so you paid a bunch of money to talk to a not doctor?
Nope. If you were a MetaMed client, you'd pay large sums of money to have some know-it-all non-doctor diagnose and treat you.
You just go to Reddit,
It's what I do.
Thiel has involved himself financially in the Enhanced Games, a sort of fucked up Olympic Games where performance-enhancing drugs are legal and athletes are allowed to profit from competition, headed by Ron D'Souza, the Australian who helped Thiel out in his proxy war against Gawker. The steroid Olympics are supposed to premiere in the first half of 2026. Sure, dude, we'll see. And then there was the rogue herpes vaccine trial. In 2016, a dying researcher named William Halford started doing unregulated clinical trials of an experimental live virus herpes vaccine on human subjects on the Caribbean island of St. Kitts. The following year, in 2017, a libertarian vaccination group called Rational Vaccines, oh my God, pledged $7 million to the since-passed scientists' efforts, $4 million of which was from Thiel.
Unregulated medical trials on human subjects are widely considered unethical. Thiel was also initially enthusiastic about Theranos, Elizabeth Holmes' fake blood testing company.
Forget about the unregulated herpes vaccine trials. The new hotness in Peter Thiel's life is hoovering up data about your period.
Oh, Thiel is a major backer of 28, formerly known as 28 by Evie, an app where women can track their menstrual cycles that also encourages women to stop using birth control. 28 is the quote-unquote fertility tracker started by the same people who brought you the conservative women's magazine, Evie. Evie still promotes the app but doesn't disclose its relationship.
Evie frequently suggests women should diet and exercise according to their menstrual cycle, and that, quote, hormone rebalancing is achievable by foregoing contraception, which is exactly what the app encourages. What could possibly go wrong by typing your reproductive health data into an app funded largely by a male billionaire who runs a spying company? Come on, sweetheart.
Try it. Tell the 57-year-old pink golem your precious data. Give him the precious.
It's extra weird that Thiel would try to make a foray into women's health when at one point in his career, he wrote as though he believed that women getting the right to vote was bad. In a 2009 essay called The Education of a Libertarian, Thiel wrote, "The 1920s were the last decade in American history during which one could be genuinely optimistic about politics. Since 1920, the vast increase in welfare beneficiaries and the extension of the franchise to women, two constituencies that are notoriously tough for libertarians, have rendered the notion of capitalist democracy into an oxymoron."
Sure, I definitely think Thiel only wants what's best for women.
Yeah. Also in The Education of a Libertarian, Thiel now infamously wrote, "I no longer believe that freedom and democracy are compatible." That statement echoes an ethos common among a crazy political movement in the U.S. known as the Neo-Reactionary Movement, of which Peter is a part.
Neo-reactionaries are also sometimes called the Dark Enlightenment, a nickname that sounds suspiciously like one of the neo-reactionaries came up with it themselves to sound cooler than they actually are.
So, Alyssa, I want you to imagine somebody. Comic book guy from The Simpsons, right? Now imagine comic book guy lost some weight and got a leather jacket. That is basically the vibe of Curtis Yarvin, the computer engineer turned blogger whose work forms the GUI center of neo-reactionary thought. Yarvin, writing under the pseudonym Mencius Moldbug, which is not a Lord of the Rings reference, as far as I know. It's just a dumb name. Advocated via a series of blog posts for a system of government that would feature individual countries governed by CEO-like authoritarian leaders with virtually unchecked power. Techno-fascist neo-reactionaryism does not support universal voting and believes that society should exist for the benefit of the elites.
And by elites, they mean the tech bro elites, not like the kind of elites who teach at universities or receive government grants for research.
And so it makes perfect sense that people from that world would want a society to function like, say, Google headquarters. Like, how bad can living in a dictatorship be if there's kombucha on tap and a ping pong table?
Thiel has given to companies that Yarvin has run. Yarvin was a big influence on the hillbilly mind of JD Vance, and Curtis Yarvin was a special guest of President Trump at the 2025 inauguration festivities.
Yarvin's blogs have also matriculated into the world of the dumbest guy in your middle school gym class via Joe Rogan, who has platformed several so-called dark enlightenment figures and thus mainstreamed a meathead version of democracy bad, dictator good. Here's Thiel on the Joe Rogan Experience, absolutely wowing Joe with some spot-on economic analysis about housing unaffordability.
If I relocated my office in LA, you have to buy a place in Florida. It costs twice as much as it did 4 years ago. And then the interest rates have also doubled. And so you get a 30-year mortgage. You could have locked that in for 3% in 2020. Now it's, maybe 6.5%, 7%.
Oof.
So the prices have doubled. The mortgages have doubled. So it costs you 4 times as much to buy a house.
Who is he talking? Like, what is he even talking about?
Think about that math. When I was driving, listening to that interview, I was like, that's not right. But Peter Thiel's most formidable nemesis, besides other people voting and basic arithmetic, is death.
Thiel was once quoted as saying, probably the most extreme form of inequity is between people who are alive and people who are dead.
Fuck yeah, dude. Even within a Silicon Valley subculture that is collectively terrified of dying, Peter Thiel is the most terrified of dying. But of course, he's packaged it as another iteration of his signature contrarianism. Basically, every Thiel quote on death and dying boils down to, well, most people have made their peace with death. I, the only correct person, think that it's fucked up that we have to die. Who's with me?
Peter Thiel told one outlet that he planned to live to be 120 by running, eating paleo, taking human growth hormone, and avoiding sugar. He's going to be cryogenically frozen after he dies, he told Barry Weiss, just in case. Thiel has donated at least $10 million to anti-aging research groups and other biotech startups so that he may one day make the ultimate contrarian move, refusing to die.
In 2016, Thiel was reported to be interested in parabiosis. Parabiosis is a process by which the blood of a younger organism is transfused into the body of an older organism for the purposes of helping rejuvenate the cells of the older organism. And around the same time, there was a startup called Ambrosia that took plasma from young donors and sold it to older clients for $8,000 a treatment. Rumors, as they tend to do, swirled that Thiel had invested in Ambrosia, but none were confirmed. Later, Thiel told Inc. magazine that he had never actually injected a young person's blood into his body in an attempt to live longer. He'd merely been interested in research into it, hence all those Peter Thiel injects young people blood stories.
Well, that clears it up, though. Ambrosia is the name of a salad made with marshmallows. I just have to say that.
Vanity-based vampirism is not the first thing Peter Thiel has expressed interest in that featured in the blockbuster video game BioShock, which is about a post-apocalyptic underwater city that was built as a libertarian paradise by an insane billionaire, only to collapse into chaos and pain. And speaking of BioShock, Peter Thiel is really into the idea of seasteading. What is seasteading, you might ask? Well, Alyssa, it's homesteading on the sea. Or as Rita, a mentally challenged character in the show Arrested Development, put it when she pitched it as her own idea, land on the ocean.
Our house is terribly hard to make.
Actually, the hardest part is finding the land.
But she wasn't smart.
Instead of making houses, maybe you should make land
For Rita had only mentally progressed
on the ocean
to the level of a first grader.
Seasteading is, and I'm really not playing it up too much here, it's the notion that people could live in a state of total freedom if only they lived in a series of floating capsules in international waters. I think pirates already invented that. The idea is you have your little seastead. You could dock it with like other like-minded seasteaders, form your own little garbage country, and decouple when one of the neighbors started playing loud music during quiet hours or when they wanted to live according to their own laws. It's an inside boy's dream. Speaking at the Seasteading Institute's 2009 conference, Peter Thiel, the ubermensch of Inside Boys, declared that seasteading was not just important, it was necessary. So necessary that he was on the board of the Seasteading Institute from 2008 to 2011 and donated $1.25 million to the cause.
Anything that can be done to create much larger numbers of countries will be very good. And so I will just leave it as this thought experiment for 2050 and what will be the number of countries in the world at that point. And I think that if we want to increase freedom, we want to increase the number of countries.
What?
No, because
Why?
see, when there's more countries, that means that the countries will compete against each other to have the lowest tax rates. Because people
Famously.
work, they are just capable of uprooting and moving to wherever they will have to pay the least amount of taxes. That's how people are, right?
Thiel said once in a speech, quote, "If it's forbidden to be spoken about, it's likely true." So in that spirit, let's talk about Peter Thiel's dead ex-boyfriend. Thiel married his longtime partner in 2017, but it was kind of an open secret that Thiel wasn't monogamous with his husband. Thiel frequently threw famously raucous gay parties at his place in the Hollywood Hills. One young man invited to one of those parties showed The Intercept's Ryan Grimm screenshots of a Facebook Messenger conversation with Peter Thiel's accountant extending an invitation. The conversation moved to a WhatsApp chat associated with Thiel's number after that, promising there would be some no-holds-barred gay fun.
A frequent flyer at those parties, at least for a few years, was Jeff Thomas, a 30-something actor and model and influencer who told The Intercept's Ryan Grimm that he'd been in a multi-year kept man relationship with Thiel starting around the COVID pandemic. Thiel bought Thomas a $13 million mansion and a $300,000 sports car, but the relationship didn't end well. Toward the end of 2022, Thomas started talking to the press and moved out of the Hollywood Hills mansion.
On New Year's Eve 2023, Thomas showed up at Thiel and his husband's New Year's Eve party at the couple's Miami compound, despite, according to the reporting from the Daily Mail, not being on the guest list approved by Thiel's husband. There was a, quote, messy showdown between Thiel's husband and Thomas.
A little over 2 months later, on March 8th, 2023, Thomas was found dead at the foot of a Miami high-rise of an apparent suicide at age 35. Many outlets mysteriously omitted the fact that Thomas was involved with Thiel from their write-ups of the incident. According to The Intercept, after Thomas's death, Miami police intended to interview Thiel, but years later, it's unclear whether that ever happened. And although an autopsy was conducted, authorities have released no more information about the tragic death of Jeff Thomas.
Shortly thereafter, Thiel began to do a lot more media. Since early 2023, there has been a pretty noticeable uptick of him recording hour-plus-long podcast interviews. Coincidence? Given Thiel's litigious history, all I have to say to this is, The fact that so many people's minds went to dark places after Thomas's death is a testament to the power of wealth, but also the reputation of Peter Thiel as a scary guy.
He is not beating the allegations of being fucking weird. In June of 2025, Thiel gave an interview to the New York Times where he acted so bizarrely that he made Ross Douthat look like Timothée Chalamet. During the interview, which was given the title card, Peter Thiel and the Antichrist, Thiel denied being the Antichrist, but claimed that the Antichrist could be working through climate activist and child Greta Thunberg, because climate activism could lead to one world government controlled by computers, etc., etc., etc.
Of course, carry on.
Continuing his streak of having wrong opinions about science, Thiel also smugly claimed that there have been no advancements in the treatment of Alzheimer's in the last 40 to 50 years. There absolutely has been.
Just because you're rich doesn't make you smart.
And he claimed during that interview that the future is in transhumanism, that is. But here's the clip that got the most play, because it showcases not only how over his skis Thiel is, but how much he hates humanity.
You would prefer the human race to endure, right? You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
Yes?
I don't know. I would.
This is a long hesitation. This is a long hesitation.
There's so many questions implicit in
Should
this.
the human race survive?
Yes.
Okay.
Turkey Leg's not sure the human race should survive.
He's going to be the only person left. He's going to have to, do stuff for himself. Look, it doesn't get much worse than Peter Thiel. He is not only a hypocritical libertarian welfare queen who makes most of his money selling surveillance software to law enforcement and genocidal governments funded by taxpayers, he's not only another whiny billionaire who wants all of the benefits of belonging to an advanced society while being an active drain on its overall well-being. It's not that he's ushered in a wannabe fascist regime in the U.S. while dreaming of a future where he can fuck off to another country and leave behind his own wreckage. And it's not that the companies he's created are turning our world into one administered by autonomous killer robots bereft of a moral center. Like the red state voters his purchased politicians court with culture war issues, Peter Thiel is afraid of everything, and he's made it everybody's problem. Thiel is ultimately a miserable person. No amount of money or floating dream houses or poolside bacchanalias can bring him any amount of happiness or satisfaction. Why would anybody that joyless want to live forever?
Erin, he's the worst. He's the worst. File under may I never encounter. He is the most boring, uninteresting person we've covered. But he's desperate to be important and interesting and want people to be curious about him. And he is just a basic bitch.
Okay, Alyssa, how do you rate Peter Thiel on our matrix of fucking guys?
I think I'm going to go with scheming sociopath and opportunist.
Mm-hmm. How far into that quadrant is he?
He's pretty deep.
Mm-hmm.
He's pretty deep. I think he is an opportunist at every turn, and it's always about himself. And he's a sociopath because he's a sociopath.
Sure. I mean, take it from Elon Musk,
Truly. What about you?
A broken clock. I'm exactly where you are. I think that he is a scheming sociopath. I think that he's beyond sociopathy, though. I think he's I
agree.
I think he's a psychopath. I think he I think he delights in harm. And I think he's bad. I think he's a bad guy. Well, that's it for this week's episode of This Fucking Guy. The series is written by me with an assist from Alyssa Mastromonaco and support from the entire Hysteria team. All of our sources and credits can be found in the show notes below.
If you like what you've seen, please like and subscribe and share with your friends.
And if you have a suggestion for another fucking guy we should cover, please leave it in the comments. We'll see you next time.